I never thought I'd be one of those guys. You know, the ones who get blindsided, humiliated by the person they trust most. But life has a way of throwing punches where it hurts the most, and this time it was my turn to take the hit. It started with a stupid little thing. A receipt. I found it tucked under the passenger seat of her car while I was cleaning it out. A receipt from some fancy steakhouse across town. We hadn't been there together, and the date on it? A Tuesday night. I'm not dumb. I didn't need a road map to figure out something wasn't adding up. That night I asked her about it. I kept my voice casual, not wanting to spook her. Hey, did you go out for dinner recently? I found this receipt in your car. Her face froze for half a second. Then she laughed. Oh, that. Yeah, a bunch of us from work went out after the quarterly meeting. You know how it is. Team bonding or whatever. Her answer sounded just a little too polished, like she'd rehearsed it. I didn't press further, but my gut told me something was off. The next few weeks I started paying attention. Not in a paranoid way, at least that's what I told myself, but enough to notice the cracks in the picture she painted. Late nights at the office. A sudden interest in her appearance. New lingerie I sure as hell hadn't seen her wear at home. And then there was her phone. Always glued to her hand, locked with a new passcode. She used to leave it lying around, but now it was practically an extension of her arm. One Friday evening, she came home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. When I asked, she shrugged it off. Probably just someone's perfume at the office. You know how it lingers. That was the night I decided I'd stop asking questions. Asking wasn't getting me anywhere. It was time to know. The next day, when she said she'd be at a work seminar, I followed her. I'm not proud of it, but pride wasn't what I cared about anymore. I wanted the truth. She didn't go to a seminar. She didn't even head toward the office. Instead, she drove to a hotel on the edge of town, parked her car, and walked in like she owned the place. 10 minutes later, a guy joined her. Mid-30s, clean-cut, wearing the kind of cheap suit that screams, corporate drone. They greeted each other like they weren't co-workers. I waited for hours, sitting in my truck, rage simmering just below the surface. When they finally came out, laughing and looking far too comfortable, I took a good, hard look at him. I memorized his face, his car, the way he carried himself. The thing about revenge is you don't rush it. You plan it. And that's exactly what I intended to do. After seeing them together at the hotel, something inside me snapped. Every moment we'd shared, every promise she'd made, replayed in my head like a broken record. But I didn't let it consume me. Not yet. I had work to do. The next morning, I kissed her on the cheek like everything was normal. She smiled, oblivious, and left for work. Meanwhile, I spent my day figuring out who this guy was. It didn't take long. A quick glance at her company's website confirmed what I needed. His name was Eric Townsend, her coworker in marketing. His profile photo was the same smarmy grin I'd seen outside that hotel. He looked like the kind of guy who thought his life was a romantic comedy where he got to be the lead. I kept digging. Social media, LinkedIn, anything I could get my hands on. He was married, of course he was. Wife and 2 kids. Picture-perfect family plastered all over his profiles. Like he wasn't sneaking around with someone else's wife in cheap hotel rooms. When she got home that night, I played it cool. I asked her about work, her coworkers, even about Eric. Her face didn't flinch, not even once. She was good, too good. Over the next week, I pieced together their routine. She'd use work meetings or overtime as excuses. Sometimes, it was grabbing drinks with the team. Each time, it lined up perfectly with her disappearing into that hotel parking lot and coming out hours later with him. One night, she left her laptop open on the dining table. I saw my chance. I wasn't sure what I'd find, but I clicked into her email anyway. Most of it was boring office junk, but then I saw it, an email thread with Eric. It wasn't explicit, but the tone was unmistakable. They joked about sneaking away and making the most of stolen time. My hands clenched into fists as I read line after line of their little love notes. I was done gathering evidence. I didn't need any more proof. Now it was time to act. The next day, I drove to Eric's house. His wife was home, playing with their kids in the front yard. She looked happy, clueless to what her husband was up to. I didn't confront her, not yet, but seeing her made me even angrier. That evening, when my wife came home, I was waiting for her in the living room. My mind raced with everything I wanted to say, but when I saw her walk through the door like she hadn't betrayed me, I couldn't hold back. "Where were you today?" I asked, standing up. She looked confused, maybe a little nervous. "At work. Where else?" "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice rising. "You think I don't know? You think I'm stupid?" Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "I followed you," I continued, stepping closer. "I saw you with him. Eric, is that who you really are now? Sneaking off to hotels with some married coworker while I'm at home?" She started crying, stammering out excuses. "It's not what you think. It was a mistake. Just once, I swear." "Don't you dare lie to me again," I snapped. "I've been watching you for weeks. I know everything." She dropped to her knees, sobbing, begging me not to do anything rash. "Please, just let me explain." But I wasn't in the mood to listen. "Oh, you'll explain. But first, you're going to tell me everything about him, where he lives, when he works, all of it. Because if you think I'm letting this go, you're dead wrong." I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, staring at nothing, replaying the confrontation over and over in my head. She'd confessed enough to confirm what I already knew, that she'd been sneaking around with Eric for months. Her tears, her apologies, her desperate pleas to fix this only fueled the fire inside me. Fix it? There was no fixing this. She'd made her bed, and now she and her lover were going to lie in it, face down, if I had anything to say about it. The next day, she didn't dare leave the house. I told her she wasn't going anywhere unless I said so, and she didn't argue. She'd already seen what I was capable of when I was angry. She knew better than to push me. While she stayed holed up in the bedroom, I got to work. I wasn't just going to confront Eric. I was going to make him pay. First, I called his office. I didn't need to say much. A quick lie about being a client got me his work schedule. He'd be at the office late that night, finishing up some project. Perfect. Then I went to his neighborhood. I parked a few streets away and walked to his house. His wife's car was in the driveway, but his was gone. I knocked on the door, pretending to be a delivery guy with a package for Eric. His wife answered, all smiles. "He's not home right now," she said. "Can I take it for him?" I gave her a polite nod and handed her an empty envelope I'd stuffed in my jacket. As she closed the door, I took a mental picture of everything: the layout of the porch, the number of windows, even the dog barking from inside. On my way back to my truck, I sent Eric a text from an anonymous number. It was short and to the point. "I know what you're doing. Meet me tonight at the diner on 5th, or your wife finds out everything." I didn't know if he'd show, but I had a feeling he would. Men like Eric think they can talk their way out of anything. When I got home, she was waiting for me, her face red and swollen from crying. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. I looked her dead in the eye. "You don't get to ask questions anymore. Sit down, shut up, and let me handle this." She started begging again, pleading with me to leave Eric alone. "It's my fault. Blame me, not him. Don't do anything stupid. Please." Her words were like gasoline on an open flame. "You think I'm just going to let him walk away after what you two did? Not a chance." That night, I waited at the diner, sitting in the farthest booth with my back to the wall. Around 9:30, he walked in, looking around nervously. He didn't see me at first, so I let him sweat for a minute before waving him over. When our eyes met, his face turned pale. He knew who I was. "Sit," I said, my voice low and cold. He sat down slowly, glancing around like he was expecting a scene. "Look, man, I don't know what you think." "Shut up," I interrupted. "You're going to listen to me, and you're going to listen good. Because by the time I'm done with you, you'll wish you'd never met her." Eric's hands were shaking as he sat across from me. Good. Let him sweat. He wasn't going to talk his way out of this. Not with me. "I know everything," I said, leaning forward. My voice was steady, but the rage underneath it was impossible to miss. You've been sneaking around with my wife for months. Hotel rooms, late nights, all of it. Don't bother denying it. I've seen it with my own eyes. He opened his mouth, probably to spout some excuse, but I raised a hand to stop him. Shut your mouth. The only thing I want to hear from you is the truth. Why her? Why my wife? He stammered for a second before the words spilled out. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I swear, man. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Didn't mean to hurt anyone? I snapped, slamming my fist on the table. The plates rattled, and a few heads turned our way, but I didn't care. You think sneaking around behind my back, lying to your wife, and destroying my marriage just happened? What kind of man does that? He looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. I'm sorry, okay? I'll end it. I'll cut her off. It's over. Oh, it's over, I said, my voice dropping low. But you don't get to just walk away. No, you're going to feel every ounce of pain you've caused. His eyes widened, panic written all over his face. Look, I'll do whatever you want. Just don't tell my wife. She doesn't deserve this. I laughed bitterly. Funny, you didn't seem to care what my wife or I deserved when you were sneaking off to your little rendezvous. But don't worry, I'm not going to tell her. Not yet, anyway. That depends on you. What do you want? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. First, I said, you're going to quit your job, effective immediately. You'll pack up your desk tomorrow and you'll disappear. No contact with her, no lingering goodbyes. Just gone. Understand? He nodded quickly, his head bobbing like a puppet on a string. Second, I continued, you're going to tell your wife everything, every detail. I want her to know exactly who she's married to. His face turned pale. No, please. I'll quit. I'll leave, but don't make me. Stop talking, I said sharply. You don't get a choice in this. You'll tell her or I will. And trust me, I'll make sure she knows every disgusting detail. Eric swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Fine, I'll tell her. Just give me a little time. Let me figure out how to. You've got 48 hours, I interrupted. And if I find out you've lied to me or gone back on your word, I'll make your life a living hell. Do you understand me? He nodded again, too scared to argue. I leaned back in my seat, letting the silence stretch. When I finally stood up, I looked down at him with pure disgust. You're lucky I'm giving you this chance. If I ever see you again, you won't be walking away next time. As I walked out of the diner, I felt his eyes on my back. I didn't care. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. When I got home, she was waiting for me, her face pale and her hands trembling. What did you do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't worry, I said, my voice cold. This is just the beginning. The next morning, I kept a close eye on her. She tried to act normal, making coffee, scrolling through her phone, but I could see the tension in her every move. She was terrified, and she should have been. Did you call him? I asked, breaking the silence. She froze mid-sip and shook her head. No, I didn't. Good, I said, because if you so much as breathe in his direction, there'll be consequences for both of you. She didn't say anything after that. Later that day, I decided to confirm if Eric was actually following through. I drove by his office. Sure enough, his car was still parked there, right where it had been every day before. The coward hadn't quit yet. I dialed his number. He picked up on the third ring. Hello. His voice was shaky, like he was already bracing for the worst. You didn't do it, I said flatly. I need more time, he stammered. It's not that simple. You had one job, I snapped, cutting him off. You think I'm playing games? You think you can just stall me and hope I'll go away? No, I swear I'll do it. I just... Save it, I growled. You've got till the end of the day, or I'm driving straight to your wife's house and telling her everything myself. I hung up before he could respond. That evening, I parked down the street from Eric's house. I watched as his car pulled into the driveway, and a few minutes later he walked inside. A light turned on in the living room, and I saw him pacing while his wife sat on the couch, watching him with a confused expression. It didn't take long for the yelling to start. His wife's voice carried through the open window, shrill and furious. "How could you do this to us? To me? To the kids? Good. Let him squirm." The next day, my wife tried to approach me. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table, her hands clasped together like she was praying for mercy. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know I hurt you, and I know you'll never forgive me. But please don't let this ruin everything. We can fix it. We can start over." I stared at her, my jaw clenched. "Fix it? Start over? After what you've done? You must think I'm as stupid as he does." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I love you. I made a mistake. A horrible mistake. But I love you. Please, just give me a chance to make this right." "You love me?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You've got a funny way of showing it." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "This isn't about love. It's about respect. And you lost mine the moment you walked into that hotel room with him." She broke down, sobbing, but I didn't care. Let her cry. Let her feel even a fraction of the pain she'd caused me. Eric's life was falling apart, and hers wasn't far behind. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. By the time the weekend rolled around, Eric's life was in shambles. Word had spread at his office, and I heard through the grapevine that he'd been asked to resign. His wife had kicked him out, too. Apparently, she didn't appreciate finding out about his affair from someone else. Good. That's exactly how I wanted it. As for my wife, she was walking on eggshells. She'd gone from pleading and apologizing to quietly keeping her distance, probably hoping I'd cool down. But there was no cooling down. Not this time. That Saturday, I decided it was time to finish this once and for all. I drove to Eric's new home, a cheap motel on the edge of town. His car was parked out front, a sorry sight with its bumper dented and one tire looking low. I sat in my truck for a while, watching the door to his room. Eventually, he came out, carrying a bag of trash to the dumpster. He looked worse than I'd imagined. Disheveled, unshaven, and wearing the same wrinkled shirt I'd seen him in earlier that week. I got out of my truck and followed him to the dumpster. He didn't hear me coming until I was right behind him. "Hey, Eric." He spun around, startled, and nearly dropped the trash bag. "Oh God, what are you doing here?" "I'm here to make sure you understand something," I said, stepping closer. "You thought you could screw with my life, with my wife, and just walk away? Not a chance." "Look, man, I'm sorry," he stammered, backing up. "I've lost everything, my job, my wife, my house. Isn't that enough?" "Not even close," I said. Before he could respond, I grabbed him by the collar and shoved him against the dumpster. The look of fear in his eyes was satisfying, but it wasn't enough. "You're going to live with this for the rest of your life," I said through clenched teeth. "Every time you look in the mirror, every time you see your wife's empty side of the bed, you're going to remember what you did. And you're going to remember me. I swear, I'll stay away," he gasped. "You'll never see me again." "You're damn right I won't," I said, letting him go. He stumbled and fell to the ground, scrambling to put some distance between us. I stood over him for a moment, letting the silence sink in. Then I turned and walked back to my truck. I didn't look back. When I got home, my wife was waiting for me as usual. She started to say something, but I cut her off. "It's done," I said. "He's out of the picture." She hesitated, searching my face. "And us?" I looked at her for a long moment, then shook my head. "There is no us anymore." Her shoulders sagged, and she let out a shaky breath. "I deserve that." "Yeah," I said, grabbing my keys again. "You do." I walked out the door, leaving her to deal with the mess she'd made. Maybe I'd forgive her someday. Maybe I wouldn't. But one thing was certain, Eric wouldn't be a problem anymore.